Moltes gràcies, Pablo. Bon dia a tothom. Also, I'm going to speak in English, but thanks for coming along. Today I'd like to talk a bit about ResearcherID, which is one of the most global disambiguation tools that we run from Thomson Reuters. Then I'll talk a little bit about how that will interact with ORCID, and also how an institution can use ResearcherID to disambiguate all of the researchers from an individual research institution. So this is ResearcherID, as you see, and the idea is that every researcher can have their own profile. It's free of charge as well. This is not something that the researcher should be asked to pay for, or their institution. So, and each researcher, when they join, gets their own ID number. So that's the number. That's my number there. So it doesn't matter how many Philip Purnells there are in the world. None of them will have the same number as me. And I can put in all sorts of information about myself. So email, subject areas. These are web of knowledge subject areas that I'm interested in or research in. And you can put in your own keywords as well to make it more specific, so that when people are looking for researchers, they can put in those keywords into a search function, and then they have a better chance of finding you. Also, you've got your own URL, so that if we type that into a browser, you will get straight to this page. Now, the publications section below, you can see here, is my set of publications. So there are 38 publications which I have said are mine. This is fictitious. They're not actually my real publications. And you can do that for yourself, but you've also got two other options to have lists of publications. So you can do it for a research group. Maybe you can put together publications from a number of people that you're interested in. But these are the ones that I'm really interested in. Those are my publications. And one of the limitations or opportunities, depending on how you look at it, is that the researcher is in charge of their own profile. They are in charge of making sure that all their publications are in, and that of course it depends upon the fact that they don't make mistakes, it depends upon their honesty, and it depends upon them keeping it up to date. But it's not difficult to keep up to date, because you can, after a period of being busy or unable to look at ResearcherID, you can go here to Add and click on this, and the system will then do a search in a number of different sources. You can make it search the whole of the web of knowledge to which your institution has a subscription. So it will search not only Web of Science, but also other databases that are within that web of knowledge. If you're only interested in the citations or the citation information, then you can just search Web of Science if you wish. Or if you have a common name, like Smith J or Gonzalez J, then you may find that the list is so long, you don't want to look through 3,000 publications to try to find yours. So you can search the distinct author sets within Web of Science. So that's the algorithm which already makes an attempt at splitting those 3,000 results into distinct researchers. It's an algorithm, so it can never be perfect, and the researcher in the end has to get involved. There's no substitution for that, but it can certainly advance and help you to reduce your burden. If you have made a publication which is not in Web of Science or any Thomson Reuters or EC database, then you can upload that as well. You can upload anything that you can put into a research or a bibliographic reference software can be then uploaded via a RIS file directly into ResearcherID. So it's not limited to Thomson Reuters indexed publications. Here I've limited the search to Web of Science, and I put in my name, but you could also put in other parameters to help reduce your search. And it's come up with 56 records with my name, P. Purnell, in Web of Science. If the record is already in my profile, then there'll be a tick already in the box. And then I can look through and say, well, this one's got my name, Phil Purnell, but in fact that's not me, so I don't click it. These next two, let's say they are me, so I do click them. And those are the only two that I can find that are recent publications that I want to add to my profile. So I then click here, Add to my publications, and they come up, 2 items added to my publications. And we go back to my list, which has now gone from 38 up to 40. So it was pretty painless, very easy, and my publication list is now up to date. Now, something that many people have to do or are interested in when they're being evaluated is things like their own citation metrics. So what I've done here is just click on that icon there. It says Citation Metrics, and it brings them up here within my profile, and it shows the number of articles in my list. And it says 40, so there are 40 in my list, but only 36 of them have citation data. That doesn't mean have been cited. The citation data could equal 0 citations. What it means is 36 of those publications are in Web of Science. And this is the citation distribution of those Web of Science papers. You can see in which year they were published, and you can gain an impression of the stage of somebody's career by looking at whether they are increasing or decreasing the number of papers. We can then see the total number of times cited and a mean citations per article to get an idea of the impact of those publications. And the H-index is here. So 10 means that 10 of these 36 papers have been cited 10 times or more. And it also tells us when we last updated this publication list. Now, there are another few features here. So it doesn't just allow you to create a list, it allows you to do something with it as well. You can create a badge for yourself, and this badge will be linked to your own profile. So some people have got their own website, their own researcher website, or a research group may want to advertise their publication profile. So they'll create this badge, and that badge there will go onto a website or a blog or whatever. And you just click here, Generate Badge Code, and it comes up here. You copy it and paste it into your desired target. You can add your profile to the signature of your email address, so that when someone receives your email, if they wish, just by clicking that, they go directly into your profile. Or you can put it onto your electronic curriculum vitae. So again, it's easier for somebody who's evaluating you to go and see your publication list. And of course, your citation metrics. Another thing you can do, either for yourself or somebody who's evaluating can do, is to look at your collaboration network. So remember that from Web of Science, we don't only index the author in question, we index all of the authors and all of their addresses. So you can then bring up a list of those author names and see who I'm collaborating with, either by their name or by their institution. Here I'm doing it by the name of the author, but you could also do it by the institution and see with which institutions is this person most collaborating. Similarly, you can look at who's citing them. Again, using Web of Science data, we can see who is citing this particular author. We can look at which authors are citing this researcher, or which categories, which subject areas is this person having most of an impact in. Alternatively, we can click countries or map, and you can see the impact of somebody's research. This is for a Spanish researcher, so European impact is not surprising. Perhaps more interesting is this cluster of citations over here on the right that shows that this person is having quite a large impact in the Far East, in Japan and in Korea. So that's how to get your own publication list and how to, and the applications of it, either for yourself or for somebody who's interested in you, or if you're interested in somebody else, then you can find them. You can find them by specific country. There's a world map here, and we can roll over a country and see how many researchers in this country. For example, Spain has nearly 10,000 researchers who have registered for ResearcherID, and you can see that by rolling over the different countries. And if you click on the country, you get a list of those people and can go into their profiles. Now, one thing we've decided to do is incorporate ResearcherID into the web of knowledge. So within the web of knowledge, wherever you are, you can click here on My ResearcherID. You need to be signed in. Okay, so you do need to sign in here with your password, and then you can go into ResearcherID and it brings up your profile. And within Web of Science, and soon within other databases within Web of Knowledge, you can search for a specific researcher ID and bring up that person's publication profile. If you come across a record, now when you look below the abstract and the top information, you can find underneath the addresses researcher ID numbers if any of the authors have a researcher ID profile. Let's say one researcher included in this record has a researcher ID, and you click, and then it says there it is, and you can click on here and you can go directly to see that person's profile. So it's integrated fully into the web of knowledge. Another issue here, a pet hate of all researchers and many people in other fields is, of course, having to input your data into a system that you've already input into another system. So one key point is that ResearcherID has been integrated into other systems. So Thomson Reuters launched a CRIS system last year called Research in View. And when you go in, when you first of all create your profile within the CRIS, you can click here, I have a ResearcherID account, and all of the papers are automatically uploaded, so you don't need to type them in again. The same with Insights, which is the Thomson Reuters performance evaluation system. If a university has a list of researchers for which they have a ResearcherID account, again, these can automatically be loaded directly into Insights, so that you can evaluate those people on their authenticated publication list. In terms of ORCID, when you first get your ORCID record, there'll be a box that says, do you have a ResearcherID profile? You put in the ResearcherID profile, and it will then invite you to automatically upload all of your papers directly into ORCID. So again, it makes it quicker. And these will be mutually synchronizable. So you can upload something into ResearcherID profile, and it will automatically appear in your ORCID record. And vice versa. When you update your ORCID record, it will keep your ResearcherID profile up to date. In terms of a university or a research institution, you can have as well an administrator tool. So I've logged in here, I've got the administrator tool, and it invites me to either go to my profile or to go to the admin tools. And what the admin tools can do is create accounts, so a large number of accounts. So you may be at a research institution with 500 researchers, and you can upload a list of those researchers either in Excel format or in an XML file. You can then upload the publications. If you wish to, you can pre-populate those profiles for the researchers. So you have a series of options depending on how, it'll depend on the institution. Some institutions have to be very careful with their researchers, and they don't want to force the people to have a profile or to upload anything. They want that to be the researcher's decision. In other cases, they can, or other countries, they can be more forceful and say, this is your profile, and we've pre-populated it for you. Please go and check and maintain your profile, because that's what you're going to be evaluated on. Again, all of these uploads, the batch uploads, as we call them, into ResearcherID for an institution are free of charge. You can also have a proxy access. So if you've got a person in the administration you want to be able to control or upload those profiles, then that person can request to become your proxy. If you then allow that person to be your proxy, then they'll be able to maintain or keep up to date your profile. And this is how an administrator tool would look for an institution where they've uploaded results for 12 people here. And it will say here the registration status. It's been confirmed by the researcher, or it's awaiting a response, or the researcher has locked it. And so that's ResearcherID, how to use it, how it will be integrated with ORCID, and how it's integrated with other systems. So, moltes gràcies. Alguna demanda?
Thank you for your presentation, Philip. I have a question regarding how to reach actual authors, researchers, in order to make them aware of systems such as ResearcherID or ORCID in the future being available. You mentioned there are 10,000 Spanish researchers registered with ResearcherID as of today. Amanda just wrote via Twitter it's 14,000, I think, for the UK. That's quite a fairly low rate of registration. I don't know if that's what we could expect authors, both for ORCID as well, to register individually. How could we enhance those figures?
Yeah, this is a key question, actually. When we look at the numbers of people registered, you see ResearcherID, maybe 250,000 researchers. Initially you think, oh, that's quite a lot. But then you start thinking, well, actually, that's quite few when you compare to all the researchers in the world. So we at Thomson Reuters have never done a big marketing campaign about ResearcherID. It's not been our objective to force people to use it. We've just made it available initially for those people who were coming to us saying, how can we disambiguate our names? I'm not sure that would be the objective of a company like Thomson Reuters, to do a mass marketing campaign about this. Our key objectives are to make sure that people who do use ResearcherID can quickly and easily integrate that list with other systems. So another question people ask is, should we be, I'm being increasingly asked this, with the advent of ORCID coming very shortly, should we still be asking our researchers to have ResearcherID accounts, or should we be waiting for ORCID? So the response is, you can do either, but if you do have a ResearcherID account, you will be able to easily integrate that into ORCID. So I think it's up to the institution themselves, or for a country or a consortium or a university to encourage the researchers to join, depending on each institution's wishes.
Thanks, Philip. Could you expand just a little bit more on the integration of the ORCID ID with the ResearcherID, particularly what metadata fields associated with an individual may be exchanged between the two systems, and which is the master system in that regard?
And which is what?
Which is the master system in that regard? If you end up having different metadata in ORCID, you know, say your institution, whatever, becomes somehow or other different in ORCID to what it is in ResearcherID, how do you solve that problem?
Okay, I'm afraid I can't expand on those. I don't actually know. Perhaps Martin from ORCID would be able to explain a little bit about the overlap between the metadata fields and I think because we're not quite there yet, ORCID's not yet launched, and our developers are still working on the integration. So in fact, there may even be a discrepancy between the date that ORCID is launched and the date that the ORCID integration with ResearcherID is launched. I think there will be a difference of some days there. So I'm afraid I can't answer that today, but it won't be long before I can.
I think that maybe nobody can answer this question today because this is very much moving target. So for example, what will be in the ORCID system initially? And I think it's easy for papers with DOIs, so that's probably not a problem to go back and forth. For the author profile, so what institutions he work, from when to when, that's already a big problem because that's free text, I think, in both systems. So this will be already a bit messy because the whole system of identifiers for institutions and departments, that's a whole different story. And then for all the other research objects where there might not be a good identifier, I don't think this is not a problem of ORCID or Thomson Reuters, but it's just something that there is no standard. So I think it will work for 90% of the things you're interested in, is my guess.
I was wondering if you could comment what your business model is for providing the service for ResearcherID. How do you plan to make money out of it, or is this something that's tangential with other projects that you're running?
Oh, it's an altruistic service for the for the good of the research community. No, it's freely available within the web of knowledge.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.